It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Tuesday, May 26th, 2025, and you know what that means. It's Memorial Day, and also it's time to get nerdy, y'all. Welcome to episode number 344 of Two Nerds in a Pod, nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. I am Lam, also known as Mr. Nice Guy, joined by my comrade, my bestie, my partner in gaming commentary, the Miggity Mac, also known as Maction. Mac, what's new on your side of the U.S.? How are things?
Things are going okay. The sun is not yet down because it's 7 p.m., well, a little bit after, but it's roughly 7 p.m. Pacific, so the sun's still up because it's summer.
Nice.
Dude, I had an interesting weekend. So I don't get sick that often, but this weekend, even near the end of the week, like Thursday, started feeling like garbage. Friday got even worse. And this is terrible because, this is a 3-day weekend, right?
Right.
And the plan is my nephews, they've got birthdays this week. So the plan, go visit over the weekend. But me, I'm feeling like absolute garbage. Thankfully, my spouse is doing just fine because I suspect that maybe they brought that back from a recent trip. All I'm saying, just throwing it out there.
Don't want to point fingers.
Don't want to point fingers. So anyway, so there I am, just kind of cuddled up in a blanket, keeping it together. And because we had planned to go, right, we called on somebody to come and check on our kitty cat. And, like once a day, a friend of ours. And so I completely forget it, didn't call it off. And so there I am taking like a midday nap in a robe. I'm all sort of like, and somebody opens the front door. I have that moment that I haven't had to have in quite some time because, again, the cows usually don't know how to open locked doors.
Right, no opposable thumbs.
Exactly. But they are learning. And so anyway, door opens, and it's my friend, and we have a good laugh about it. Brings me chicken noodle, too, after he finds out. So shout out to him. He's a great friend. Not only for watching the cat, but also for being nice after the fact. So anyway, that was about as exciting as my week got. A lot of sleeping. But I'm feeling a lot better now, which is good.
Dude, so it's funny. Middle-aged now. Mm-hmm. And sleep is something I enjoy. Like a lot of the times when we do the what have we been watching and what have we been playing segment, mm-hmm. I'm like, I've been sleeping, watching the back of my eyelids, trying to get some rest and catch up on all the exhausting activities. So it's good that you got some sleep. Are you completely better now, or do you still have the carryover of that illness?
I'm through it, and I think I'm all done now.
Well, over here, it was a pretty basic weekend. Now, you've been to my home several times, both in Wisconsin and Illinois and in all the places I've lived. And you know that one of the things that I am really, really into is smoking meat. I love to barbecue. It's Memorial Day. It's a sunny day. And we decided to barbecue today. So we did some ribs on the grill, on the pellet smoker. We did some hot dogs. We did all the sides. And we also went to a local store named Kopp's that happened to have, Mac, a custard flavor called key lime pie. And it has got to be one of the best custards I have ever eaten in my life. It was their flavor of the day recently. And so we enjoyed that. And then we did some pool time. The community pool is now open, so we walked up the street and did that and hung out, had some drinks, had some snacks for the kids. Very, very relaxing day. The only thing that could have made it more relaxing.
Laser tag.
No, I was going to say a round of golf.
Oh, okay, fair.
It's warm weather time. The hobbies shift a little bit as it gets warmer outside. But yeah, it was a good weekend.
That's great to hear, dude. I'm glad that you had a relaxing one.
Yeah, I have no funny stories this week. Like, I have nothing super interesting to say. So on that note, I say we do what we do best and hop right up in that gaming news. Mac, what do you think about that?
Absolutely, Mr. Nice Guy. I'm especially out of the loop this week. What is new in video gaming?
Dude, there's a lot that's new. I almost want to just go off the cuff. First of all, episode 344, Two Nerds in a Pod. Thank you for tuning in, those who are here live and those who listen after the fact, which is like most of y'all listen after. I kind of want to just get your vibe on the Switch 2. And I feel like I am pretty dialed in. This is not a news story. I feel like I am pretty dialed into the video game industry, obviously. And generally when there's a console launch, I feel like there's a lot of hype. Maybe it's because there's a new game. Maybe it's because we're starved of hardware. Maybe it's just because people are excited to spend some of their disposable income on a new shiny toy. My perception of the Switch 2 is that it is getting a lot less hype, a lot less excitement than previous console releases have gotten, whether it was the PS5, whether it was the Xbox One back last generation, or even the Switch in 2017. I'm not hearing a lot about this. I'm not seeing a lot about this. Curious if you'd agree in the things that you're reading, and if you have any idea as to why that might be. I think it's very odd. Maybe I'm completely wrong here.
So I will say that I kind of travel in different circles, as it were, with respect to my video game hype. I have seen a few people who are real excited about it, got the pre-orders and things like that. But I wonder if it has something to do with the fact that in the Switch 2, there's not that much new/different. It's, small improvements. I don't know if you would say that the Switch 2 feels like a console refresh or feels more like a mid-gen refresh, but, there are times where the hardware over and beyond does something completely new or completely different. Or when the Wii brings in motion controls, the Wii U adds its screen and controller. Or even the Switch itself making a more mobile console. The Switch 2 doesn't seem to be breaking too many new grounds. So I don't know, maybe that's it. Or maybe there's a lot less talk about it because people are even more concerned now than they were before about being able to get their hands on one. So there's maybe a hesitancy to let's not hype it up too much for something that I may not even be able to get my hands on. I don't know. These are just all spitballing.
And I don't know about the scarcity thing, because I think that's always a thing, especially with Nintendo.
Fair.
There's sometimes artificial scarcity there, and we've seen that with some of the side consoles they've released, like the NES Classic and the SNES Classic. I will say this, I've been gaming since the original NES, and there was a time where those jumps between consoles were a big deal graphically, right?
Yeah.
And then a new controller. Back when gaming was much more in its infancy in terms of the home entertainment system, going from 8-bit to 16-bit, going from a controller that had 2 buttons to one that had 4 and triggers on the top, from the NES to the SNES. Those types of changes just aren't happening anymore. It's a lot harder for us to get excited. That said, I just think I would have expected a lot more hype around a new console that also has a new Mario Kart game, and also is a new hybrid at a time when hybrid consoles are much, much more popular. The Wii kind of was a pioneer. I think that part of it, Mac, might be 2 things. Part of it might be the tariff war. And some of the volatility that we're seeing in the stock markets. Maybe people are just a little bit more pressed for cash, or a little bit more hesitant to put cash into something that is not an essential item. I don't know. It's very, very strange to me. The timing of it, not Nintendo's fault. They decided they were going to put this out, and then we started dealing with all this other stuff.
Yeah.
I just think it's very odd. Usually consoles are hyped way more. I also think it's kind of a weird time of year to release it during summer. Maybe it's smart because kids are going to be at home from school, and they think they'll bug their parents and say, "Can you get this for me?" And we'll say, "Yeah, if we can find it." As a gamer who often buys consoles day one, I'm just not super excited about this. And it could be that life is just so busy that the idea of picking up yet another console when I literally have access to so many, with me and the kids and the wife, and the ones that we own, is just not appealing. But it's just, I've never seen or witnessed the lack of hype that I feel the Switch is having. So that's just an observation. Was curious on your thoughts. And we'll see.
Well, hey, I've got one question before we leave the Switch 2 conversation. Are you still holding strong and not getting one?
I don't know if I'd call it holding strong, because it wasn't I'm mad at Nintendo or like they've done something that made me.
Yeah, not like me. You're not petty like me.
Yeah, I'm not petty like you. Like Mac takes shots at all these companies that someday we may want to work with. He hates EA. He hates Nintendo.
It's true, and I hate you so much. The funniest thing you could do is try and sponsor this show. I would hate it, and I would constantly be like,
That's the problem with having a podcast with two decision makers and only two is like any vote that's not unanimous is a 50-50. But anyway, yeah, so I don't know. We'll see what happens with the Switch 2. Mac, if I was to walk in and see one in a store, I might cave and get it.
Okay.
There's just nothing exciting about it.
Yeah.
Is really the reason why I'm holding strong and not getting it.
Yeah.
Until there's a library, you know?
Yeah. Well, I was just curious primarily because I wanted to see where you were at, if, something had changed since last we chatted.
No, the only thing that has me excited is a new Mario Kart. Had a conversation about that, but other than that, I think I'm good.
Cool.
Well, hey, let's talk about some other stuff because there's actually quite a bit to talk about in the gaming newsroom today. And let's start by talking about Fortnite. Now, last week, 2 weeks ago, when I was last on the show, you talked about Epic versus Apple. And interesting update. This is on GameInformer.com, written by Wesley LeBlanc. Here's what Wesley wrote. Fortnite, Epic Games' mega popular battle royale, is back on the iOS App Store in the U.S. nearly 5 years after being removed. Apple kicked Fortnite off the iOS store in 2020 after Epic added its own payment system, violating Apple's at the time rules and preventing Apple from receiving kickback fees. However, after the court in Epic's case against the iPhone maker ruled in favor of Epic last month, preventing Apple from taking kickback fees from purchases made outside of apps in the U.S., the game has finally returned to the iOS App Store. It's also available on the Epic Game Store and Alt Store in the EU now. And then it gives a link to where you can find it. Mac, this is actually pretty huge news. It's been off of the store for 5 years.
Yeah.
I don't really have a specific question for you, but can you help me understand how did the outcome of the case, because you probably have a better understanding of it than I do, affect the fact that this can now be back on the App Store? People are excited. My kids have downloaded it. I downloaded it just in case it goes away again. Help me understand this.
Okay, sweet. So way back in the day, 5 years ago, right, when Epic made their workaround so that Apple no longer got the cut of their, of their purchases, of the purchases in the app, right? That was among the behaviors that were expressly forbidden by Apple's contract. And so when that happened, they kicked him off. And that was what started it. Then we had a lot of back and forth, a lot of muddying the waters and such. But at the heart of it was, you broke the contract. We said we'd kick you if you broke the contract. We're kicking you. And then there was a lot of Epic trying to be like, oh, you're an illegal monopoly, Apple, blah, 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 all that sort of thing. When the case finally resolves, they say, okay, Apple, you can kick them because it's your contract, it's your whatever, you guys aren't a monopoly. However, it is unfair business practices for you to be like, there is no, to disallow them any way for people to buy stuff not within your ecosystem. And so then, even after that is settled, Apple's doing the sort of back and forth. And then it isn't until a couple of months ago that we find out that Apple has been really doing a lot of shady nonsense in the background, including but not limited to, destroying evidence and such. We talked a little bit about that a couple weeks ago, the nonsense that they were up to. Right. And then the judge really came down on them hard and was just like, all right, so we're not fiddling around with this anymore. Apple, you will do what you were ordered by this court to do. There are going to be some really serious consequences if I don't see immediate and drastic changes. And this is one of the immediate and drastic changes that Apple decided to take as a result of that, because the case was resolved and the appeals were done for about 9 months ago. So the fact that it's only changed right now when they really run themselves afoul of criminal contempt just shows how much Apple wanted to fiddle around. And that is how they're back on the App Store now.
Got it. So you feel like this is part of the judge's influence?
Oh, it's absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense, because I feel like even though the judge ruled against Apple, they could still be like, fine, we're not going to put you back on the platform, though. Like, just to be petty.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I think Apple was at. They were like we're just, we're not letting you back on. We're going to be petty, and there's this and that. And they very much were like slow walking everything. You can totally do this in legal cases. You can slow walk and bury people in discovery, stretch things out for a long time. It's really just limited by the amount of money you've got to throw at something. You can delay justice as long as you want, as long as you got cash. And Apple's got so much cash.
Yeah, I bet they're not hurting for money. 100%.
They are not. And so, in this case, I think the reason that they're back on now, 100% the judge's influence, and 100% a direct result of them effing around and now finding out.
Well, this is ultimately good news for gamers. Whether you like Fortnite or not, this type of stuff brings more, what's the word I'm looking for? More attention to games and the ability to play them in the mobile sense. So, like, my son played some Fortnite. He downloaded it. He's like, I won. Like, I came in third place even using bad controls. And so it makes me hope that a company like Epic, that a company like Apple, as we get more and more really, really big prevalent mobile games, will come up with better ways to play them without having to go buy a third-party controller, but somehow making the controls just on the screen in the game a little bit more effective. What were you going to say, Mac?
Oh, I was going to say, I also hope it is instructive for all of them to step a little bit more lightly on this kind of fooling around nonsense, because they sure do a lot of it.
Mac is using a lot of old people words today, things like fooling around, and I think you said shenanigans earlier, maybe. I don't know.
I wrote in on my penny farthing earlier, you little whippersnapper.
None of these are legal terms as we talk about this legal issue, but it is what it is. We mix seriousness with nonsense. So yeah, Fortnite's there now. If you want to get it, download it before Apple changes their mind again, and this is a pretty big deal that it's back on there.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have been wanting to download it and have not been able to. Great news for gamers, terrible news for teachers, but it's almost summer school. Or it's almost summer rather, so not a big deal. Mac, another news story. This is on GameSpot.com, written by Haley Williams. A big new update for SteamOS is here. After months of development in beta, SteamOS version 3.7.8 includes a lot of fixes and improvements on a system level, and will introduce a battery saver feature for the Steam Deck for the first time. The new battery saver option is called Battery Charge Limit and can be found under the Power sub-menu in Settings. The feature allows users to set a maximum charge limit for the Steam Deck with a maximum of 80%, recommended for devices that are usually left on charge or that rarely have their battery fully depleted. As you may remember, we talked about this a couple weeks ago for the Nintendo Switch 2, and now Steam has probably said, hey, that sounds like a good idea. The Steam Deck has been out for a couple years, but let's do what we can to preserve these batteries for our users. Am I reading too much into this, Mac? That we may not get another Steam Deck for a while if they are putting these types of features in to preserve the battery long term?
I don't know.
Do you get where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I can see where you're going with it. I would not be surprised if we're in for a wait. Of course, I think this is perfectly reasonable to point to this as a portent of an even longer wait in the future. I hadn't thought about that, but that's entirely possible.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know, man. I have started to use my Steam Deck less and less. I'm interested to hear what your usage rate has been. Now, once again, this is because lots going on, lots of different ways to play games. Steam Deck just hasn't really had anything that I can't play elsewhere or that I really need to be able to play portably. I'll get in around a Balatro every once in a while. There's a couple indies that I have been playing, but I'm not using it for AAA experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say my analog pocket of my handheld stuff is getting the most of my time.
I'm playing a lot on the Steam Deck. Probably use it 3-4 times a week, if not every day. It kind of goes back and forth.
Okay.
A lot of the time, though, I do play it docked on the television and do leave it plugged in. So I am excited for the battery saver feature. Hopefully, it'll help me get some more cycles out of my battery. But yeah, so I'm still playing it plenty.
And I guess just thinking about Steam generally, like we sometimes forget how revolutionary of a device this is. The fact that they keep updating it, to me, is also a sign that we may have this for a while. I mean, I would never expect a company like Steam to just stop updating a piece of hardware like this unless they were going to completely abandon it, like the Steam controller or like something else. But I just don't see them putting out a Steam Deck 2 for a very, very long time. And it's unfortunate. I'd like a Steam Deck too.
I think you could be right. I think that's something I hadn't considered, but yeah, maybe that's the case. Maybe we're in for a while before a Steam Deck too.
Debating if I want to do one more news story or not. There's so much stuff here. I think we're good for now. That's been our news for the week.
All right. Well, now that we've looked at what's going on right now, let's take a look into the past with some video game history. Mr. Nice Guy, there have been some truly monumental moments in gaming this last week and years before. I'll share a couple that are a bit more modern. For example, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, released in 2018. Released for kind of all the modern consoles. This is a game that I've played and enjoyed. I don't know if Curse of the Moon was one that you played. Bloodstained Curse of the Moon.
It's crazy because it's been on the wish list for a while, and I've never gotten around to it. But effectively a Castlevania style, right?
Exactly, and done by Inti Creates, the people who've done basically most of the modern Mega Man games. That's Mega Man 9 and 10, as well as the Mega Man ZX series on handhelds and such. So, like, they know how to make a side-scrolling retro-style game with more modern sensibilities, and they knocked it out of the park in Curse of the Moon. Just throwing that out there.
Okay, good to know.
But yeah, so another one in 2000 for the Nintendo 64, a game called Perfect Dark. I'm sure none of us have played that before.
Fantastic game.
Yes, an excellent game. And I did not play Perfect Dark until probably a couple of years back when I got a chance to play it on an emulator. Even in spite of my having the actual hardware, it was just one of those games that never stood out to me from the title. Like, Perfect Dark doesn't seem like an actually a title that just grabs you, I don't think, but fantastic gameplay. And I was very grateful for friends like you who suggested it and said that it was worth playing, because it was a great time.
Controversial opinion, and maybe not so controversial.
Yeah.
I was always a GoldenEye 64 kid. The group of people I hung out with, Perfect Dark was there, but GoldenEye 64 to us was really the penultimate shooter for the N64. So shout out to Perfect Dark for offering an alternative. But back when movie tie-ins were still really a thing that were good, GoldenEye was what it was about.
Absolutely. Well, let's see. Okay, last two, and both of these are, in their own ways, groundbreaking, I guess one could say, in gaming. A release in 2013 on the iOS, Flappy Bird.
Oh, man, Flappy Bird.
Right. This game was everywhere, and then it was nowhere because, according to the developer who put it together, he was worried that he had basically created a monster, and so he pulled it off the market. And then, as a result, we had people who were selling devices that had Flappy Bird on it installed, selling them on eBay for tons of money. Until eventually we had clones and re-releases and things like that. But it was a moment in sort of rage gaming. Incredibly simple game, but yet it just exploded. And I think a lot of it had to do with that combination of live streaming, really making Flappy Bird go crazy as a sort of viral sensation.
And it was free.
Absolutely. Did you get sucked into the Flappy Bird craze?
I did. I played Flappy Bird, dude. And so I remember reading at the time that because of the ad revenue generated by that game, that the developer was making like $50,000 a day, just based on ad revenue.
Dare to dream.
And I remember, just for context, I remember going to a comedy show while Flappy Bird was a thing, and the comedian just like riffing on Flappy Bird for like 15 minutes. Like, it was a big thing among gamers and among casual phone owners. So it was huge.
Yeah. And every one of us, if not a gamer, casual phone owner for sure.
That's right.
And then perhaps one of the biggest ones, if anything could be bigger than Flappy Bird, it's definitely the 1990 release on PC of Solitaire. Universally played by everyone, I would say. But Mr. Nice Guy, what do you know about Solitaire itself, other than it's everywhere?
I mean, I know I played a lot of it. Like, I know that it's a single-player card game. It's a time waster. I'd say it's better than Minesweeper.
Hot takes.
Yeah, I mean, easily, right? It's more fun than Minesweeper, but not as fun as Balatro, in terms of games that you can play by yourself. But I don't know if I feel like Solitaire walked, so Balatro. Wait, hold on. Solitaire crawled, so Balatro could walk.
Love it, man.
That's how I'd put it.
Well, Solitaire was made by a bored summer intern programmer at Microsoft who did it instead of studying for finals. And it kind of had the added bonus of helping people practice using the mouse, especially drag and drop, which, if you think about it, back in these early days of graphical user interfaces, you didn't have, you had to teach people how to drag and drop things, how to move things. Previously, you had just typed in for the computer to do things, move things, play things, shuffle this file from here to there if you needed to do that sort of thing. But this game, Microsoft included it, presumably because it would help teach people those things in a game form, and it shipped with everything. Apparently, as of this day, I think still the summer intern has still received, as far as I'm aware, no compensation for Solitaire, other than just what he was paid in his internship, which I'm given to understand was not much. But from somebody who's bored and trying to waste time not studying for finals, to a beloved game that helps everybody waste time. It did, however, and this is a darn shame that it didn't ship with it, it had a built-in hotkey that you could press that would make it look like you were actually doing work, which in his case was computer programming.
Nice.
So it would show a window of, C code running so that he could pretend like he was doing that. They made him cut that before they shipped the final game out with everything, but still, what could have been. Big week in gaming history.
Love it, love it, love it. Well, Mac, it's time to move on to our next segment called The Topic of the Week, where we talk about something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it. And we're going to go back and discuss something that has come up in the past. You may remember, if you're a longtime listener of the show, that we did do an episode where Mac and I interviewed Ross Scott of Stop Killing Games.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because his work continues to pop up all over the place. And I came across an article today on Rock, Paper, Shotgun that talks about what he is doing and related to online game requirements specifically. So let's dive in. This is written by Edwin Evans Thurwell. Here is what Edwin writes. Stop Killing Games are a self-described consumer movement who are aggrieved about all the games with online requirements that become partly or completely unplayable once publishers end official server support. They're trying to persuade larger advocacy organizations like the European Consumer Organization to propose new laws that put a stop to such shenanigans.
Yeah!
And maybe you didn't say shenanigans earlier, but hey, I just said it right now. To support their campaign, they've carried out a survey of games with online requirements to work out how many are dead, in quotes, dying or enduring, thanks to developer or fan implemented end-of-life plans, such as patched-in offline functionality. The resulting Google spreadsheet has 738 entries, of which a whopping 70% are apparently no longer playable or destined to become that way. You can view the spreadsheet here. The survey sorts games into three broad categories: those that are no longer playable, those that are at risk for want of plans to maintain them once official support has ended, and those that have been saved by means of, say, the public release of the server code. They found that of the 738 games, 299 were dead, 313 set to meet the same fate in the absence of publisher action, and 110 of the games surveyed have been preserved by industrious players following the cessation of official support, while just 16 had been salvaged by the developers. Mac, these are some very compelling numbers.
Indeed.
And my question for you is, can we even rely on the games industry, on the developers, to help move this forward? Or are our efforts placed in the wrong spot? Should our efforts be placed more on appealing to the communities to work to keep these games alive?
So I think the answer is probably it depends on where you're putting your trust. Because I'm not good at math, But if I had to guesstimate, it sounds like something like 3%. Maybe it's lower, maybe it's maybe it's closer to 5. But it sounds like only about less than 5% of the games that require that connection, that, whatever format that is, have actually been preserved by the efforts of the developer.
Yeah, 16 of 738.
Yeah, that sounds about like 3 or 4%.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's what it is when we've done kind of nothing,
Right.
I am surprised about the fan efforts, because in order to do that, those fan efforts to make this game still playable, that means you've got to spend hours upon hours violating copyright law that could land you into hot water. You could be sued for your efforts of circumvention of copy protection, of the reverse engineering. Those could get you sued, but you do it for the love of your game.
I would guess that at least in some of these cases they got the go ahead, right? Maybe not all of them, but I would imagine that in some they said, "Hey, we want to preserve this. Are you cool with that? Could you even maybe send us some assets?" And maybe the company said, "Sure." I'm thinking outside the box here. I might be wrong there.
I guess the question would be, is the company's acquiescence, is the company's blessing put it in that bucket of the 3%? Or does it put it in that bucket of the fan preservation?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't want to get too granular. It's a great question. I would imagine it puts it in the fan preservation, because they're ultimately spending the money and the time.
Yeah.
My thing with this is, and I really liked when we interviewed Ross Scott. I think that what he is doing is fantastic work.
Oh yeah.
I just wonder if we made people pay for every episode of our podcast, and we eventually said, we don't have the time or the energy to do the podcast anymore. Hopefully that never happens.
Yeah.
And then someone said, well, no, we paid for this. And I don't know, maybe this isn't the best analogy. They said, no, we paid for this. We want to still have access to it. Like, we still want the old episodes. Like, we want you to continue to leave them up with the server space that you're paying for. And we said, no, we don't want to do that. Like, would we feel obligated to keep it up just because they had paid for it in the past? And that's where my dilemma comes in with the whole Stop Killing Games thing, is the developer works on something. It's a passion project. Maybe it's even the first game that they came out with. And they did well, and they want to cash out, and they want to go do something different. And they don't feel like they should feel obligated to support that anymore. Now, as the gamer, that's very frustrating. I may have digital assets. I may have community. I may have accounts that I've created and built up. But ultimately, I think I just have to say goodbye. And so to me, it makes more sense to lean on the community of people who are really, really still passionate to keep the game going, rather than people who have moved on from it. And that's just me.
Sure. Well, I will point out that the Stop Killing Games, the effort that Ross Scott has advocated is not that somebody's required to keep it up.
Correct.
But rather that they're required to patch it or close the game in such a way that allows people to play it on their side if they want to do the things. In that analogy, we wouldn't have to keep hosting it, but we would just have to allow it to exist in a way that somebody else could host it, or somebody else could keep it up if they wanted to dedicate that time and those resources. It would always be on the fans to keep the game going. Even if Stop Killing Games got its way, the only difference would be that you wouldn't have it's being preserved just by fan effort, but it's been a collaboration from the dev and the fans. And of course, with things like the European Citizens Initiative, a legal requirement to make that thing. You don't want to sell, you don't want to maintain it anymore, but walk away with the profits you've had. Well, you need to at least leave it functional at the end,
It would be nice to at least once a year, twice a year, be able to hop onto Gotham City Imposters.
Yeah.
And play a match. Even if it was with bots.
Yeah.
Just to show my kids, like, I used to play this game and have so much fun. I cannot play it at all anymore. In fact, I think it's been delisted from Steam. But I also understand...
Or if you could run the server and then get a...
group of friends.
Mr. Nice Guy's treehouse thing going.
Right.
In order to, in order to make that happen. Like, I'd show up. I'd die immediately and I would be sandbagging the whole team, but I'd play.
But it'd be a fun hangout, and I get both sides here, and I feel like I kind of pushed back a little bit when we interviewed Mr. Scott, because I do think that what he's doing is fantastic. I also think that it sets a dangerous precedent for developers to go into a game knowing that it's going to be challenging for you to move on from that game in the future. Might make people less inclined to put certain features in their games, right? They might say, you know what, we were going to put a multiplayer on here, but I don't want to deal with the headache 10 years from now, 15 years from now, of having to keep the servers, not keep the servers active, but give access to the game if we decide we no longer want to work for it for whatever reason. Let's just do the single player, patch it, and it'll be good to go. Like, I think that in that way we could be hurt as gamers if people are willing to do less, or rather wanting to do less, because they know that more will be expected from them on the back end.
Counterpoint, is the potential loss in the future worth the very real loss of 70% now?
Yeah, because the future loss is potentially infinite, right?
I don't know.
We're looking at a fixed amount now, 70% of a certain number of games, versus the potential to lose out on a lot of really good content because developers say, no, we're not going to put this game out in multiplayer.
Do you think,
because we know what's going to happen.
Do you think we would lose more than 70% of all future games as a result of the requirement?
What I'm saying is not that we'd lose games, but we might not get as high quality of games. Yeah, we'd lose multiplayer stuff or online functionality. I absolutely think that we would, yeah.
I just don't think that the balance of those harms leans more toward the future loss rather than the current and past loss. But, I mean, I might just have a different take on it. You know me, dude. I'm not that much into multiplayer, so maybe my values and my consideration is just very, very different.
Well, first, let me address two things here.
Sure.
First is that it's not just online multiplayer, it's online functionality. So it could be online achievements, it could be co-op, right? You're a big co-op guy, or at least open to the idea of co-op.
Oh yeah, love
so it
good
could be
co-op.
things like that, where they say, you know what, we were going to make this so you could do it co-op, but instead we're going to make it single player only. But that's the main one. Yes, it's all hypothetical. Oh, this is the other thing. When we look at this from the lens that we do, it's based on nostalgia. It's based on, maybe I have a game or two in mind that I've played in the past, and I don't like the idea of that game not being able to be played. That 70%. We have no way of knowing what we could potentially miss out on in the future because developers back off from giving us certain things. We have no way of knowing.
We could miss out on the secret to world peace in lacking the multiplayer content that's coming for the future.
Right. We could miss out on a lot, man. We could miss out on Chasm MMO.
Ooh.
If that could even be a thing.
I mean, if it could.
But I think you get what I'm saying is, you know, people could just give us less for fear of being required to do more on the back end. And that, to me, is a scary thought.
I believe we are getting less even under the current circumstances because we're losing so much of the game. Because even if we say, like, you know, Mac is a law-abiding citizen, some component of the 20-25% of online-enabled games that are being rescued by fan efforts, some component of those are, air quotes, illegal because they do not have the blessing of the devs. They are a copyright infringement, could potentially land them in hot water. So depending upon where the buckets is, the issue is we're looking at games that require an online connection to phone home to the publisher.
Sure.
And we're finding that only 3% of them are actually getting, honest to goodness, the devs, the publishers more likely, are putting those tools out there, being good guy publisher.
Yeah.
And so if that puts us at 90% or, you know, 97% or somewhere in there of those worlds that if people were law abiding and the publisher was, you know, making that calculus for themselves of what they want to give and share us, the customers, then we already know that calculus is losing somewhere in the order of 90% of games. It's only because of the lawlessness that we're even getting the 70% of games are dying.
We're making an assumption that it's lawlessness. It may not be.
Sure,
Like,
it may not be.
We don't
I
know that.
guarantee you that some amount of that 25% that is being saved by fan efforts is lawlessness. Because there's no way that all that has the blessing of the publisher.
It may have the apathy of the publisher, though.
Indeed, but apathy is a little shield against the might of. We see mergers and acquisitions happen all the livelong day in the gaming sphere. All we need is Bethesda or ZeniMax to buy up somebody, and then suddenly they're coming after your fan preservation effort for whatever game you did, because now it's ZeniMax's IP, and ZeniMax, their lawyers, they need to justify their paycheck.
Well, here's what I will say. We almost seem to think that we should rely on the devs in order for it to be legal.
Well, technically, it is the only legal way for it to happen.
I would be interested to look at that 3 or 4% that was preserved by devs and see what the caliber of the preservation was. I'm obviously not going to go through and do that. I don't have time for that.
We don't have that time in this 1-hour podcast, Mr. Nice Guy.
Or in my personal life to go play all those games that I don't care about.
True, you are a busy man.
We both are.
Yeah.
I guess my point is more that 3 or 4%, did they say, fine, we'll keep it live? And then they just made a crappy version of what was once the game. And said, it's almost like, I'll say this and then we really got to move on. It's almost like when you ask an author or you ask a Neil Druckmann, what was meant by this in the game? What was the meaning of this, right? And they tell you. You kind of just have to go with it, whether you like it or not. And this is a similar situation because if they are told they have to preserve a game, they could just patch the game and be like, oh, yeah, we were going to release a patch that makes the game completely unplayable. And the whole screen is black and you have to play with the whole screen being black and you really can't see what you're doing. But hey, that's what we were going to do. It's still there. Feel free to go play it. This is the patch 1.2.3 and this is the last one we're ever putting out. And that would be ridiculous. I'm not saying people are doing it to that extent, but maybe the effort that the devs are putting out is a lot more half-hearted because they're frustrated by these requirements. That's all I'm saying. It could be true. Who knows?
Could be true. We don't have a time machine, and we don't have a sliding device, but I'm working on both of them.
Nice. Well, Doc Mac, that has been our news for the week.
All right. Well, now let's turn to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off of the ground. We call this Kick or Kick Start, and I am dropping a link in the chat to this crowdfunding project. It is called the Jarhead, and it is a light gun. So let me start by acknowledging that I recognize that this is a piece of hardware that is a little bit, shall we say, niche. Not everybody is going to need or want one of these. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of games that don't involve light guns. I think the amount is probably something in the sub 200, just off the top of my head. Now, this is a light gun that is meant to be able to interface via USB and the light gun sensors with your Raspberry Pi, or they also have a console that'll essentially act as a pass-through for controllers or systems that won't use a USB. But it will work directly with something like, say, a Raspberry Pi if you're using that to emulate, and so on. There are some very cool things about it. The IR sensors, the light gun itself happens to have a kind of a cool look, and even though I haven't held it in my hand, I get the impression from the video that it's got some nice solid weight to it, combined with some, vibration to sort of simulate blowback, discharge from the gun, things like that. Anyway, they show in the sort of Kickstarter visuals a particularly high accuracy tracking on the television, where they've got the two IR sensors on the top and the stuff below. Anyway, that's the Jarhead. Now, they're hoping to ship these units in November. So, we're looking at, what's that, 5-6 months out, somewhere in that order. And in order to get one light gun and the 2 IR sensors, which is what you would need to, say, interface with your Raspberry Pi, it is $124, which is a little much for something like a light gun that is objectively not non-essential. And if you're looking for something that will go ahead and interface with your other things that don't have just a USB port for an input device, then you're looking at something closer to the light gun and the console bundle for $234. So it's not exactly quick, easy, and cheap to get into. But then again, neither are some of the people who use racing simulators and things like that.
That's a fair point.
You and I, we're not the target audience here, but it might be an easy way. Now, one last thing is that they're looking for just shy of $300,000 in order to bring this project to completion. And, they are very far of that goal right now. 56 days left to go, but it does look like this is going to be a bit of an uphill battle for these guys. Mr. Nice Guy, I think that's kind of the big stuff. Anything you want to highlight?
I think this is rad. I think this is awesome. I'm looking at my left, and you can't see it on screen, but I have the Raspberry Pi arcade machine that I built that doesn't get used very much. And part of the reason I built it is because it was a super fun project, but also I wanted to be able to play a lot of the retro games that I grew up playing all in one compact thing. And it is built and powered by a Raspberry Pi. So the idea of being able to play a House of the Dead or any of those other shooter games is extremely exciting. I will say this is not a unique product. There are a lot of other versions of things like this out there. This is simply a different one. One thing that I really, really like about this is it looks like it has recoil control, which I think is awesome. I think the more realistic you can make this type of thing, the better. Otherwise, it's just another generic piece of hardware that sits around, gets used twice, and never gets used again. They were really brilliant with how they put their Kickstarter together. They show the timeline of things that they did before they were on Kickstarter, which is not something that we see enough of. Usually we see someone who says, hey, I have an idea. Here it is. And I hope that it gets an audience on Kickstarter. These folks show, going back to 2022, as I'm scrolling through here, what they did to prepare for this moment before they put their project out to the world. And I think that that's a really good business practice and gives me a little bit more confidence in what they are doing. November is a really, really great release date, by the way. 5 months out, they say, we need the money and we're going to get this to you. We're not a year out. We're not 2 years out. It's not 18 months out. We're ready. The one thing that I don't like about this, Mac, that kind of gives me pause is that they have 7 backers and they've raised about $6,700. So I'm going to do some generous rounding here. Each of their backers has paid about $1,000, $800, $900, whatever it is. This is them, right? Like, this is their mom. This is their brother. This is their friend. This is their own money that they've put to get this started. And I just don't know that they have the audience to get this funded, which is frustrating, especially at just under $300,000 of a goal.
And it does sound like somebody's mom threw some extra in. And yeah, it's a shame because it looks like this could be a solid thing, but $300,000, I just don't see them getting there.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I'm not as dialed into the Raspberry Pi community as I used to be when I was building my arcade, but I almost wonder if this is too niche. You know, a light gun that's designed for the Raspberry Pi. I wonder how many people are still really doing these type of projects with the Pi that would require a light gun. Enough to get 300,000? Maybe not, unless like everyone who's into this buys it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I do love seeing things like this, though, because even if it's not necessarily for me, if it's not in my niche, I think the point of Kickstarter, in my opinion, is so that people who see a niche that's not being served can hopefully help fulfill those needs. And this is exactly the type of thing that Kickstarter was made for and should be used for. If you've got an idea for a good light gun and you're not finding what you want on the market, here it is. And obviously, I hope they're successful. I would say kickstart, as I like the idea generally, but I know I'm not getting one of these because I don't have any light gun games that I love and want to play, nor do I have a sweet, awesome Raspberry Pi arcade like Mr. Nice Guy does.
You know what, though, Mac? Here's what I'll say. I say kickstart this 100%.
Okay, yes.
If and when it comes out, if the price point is a little bit less than what it's at, I'd pick up a pair of these. It's one of those things where you realize with these niche products, you buy them, you use them a few times, you're really excited, and then you use it when friends come over.
Yeah.
And I don't want to invest in something like that that's not going to get used a lot.
Sure.
But I say kickstart this, though. I want it to be funded.
Yes. There it is. We say kickstart. We want this to be funded. If you are looking for something to support and you're looking for a light gun that may be compatible with your Raspberry Pi, or if you put in a few more dollars may be compatible with your other consoles, then this is something that may be able to do that. I do especially like the idea, now that we've got so many things using flat screen televisions, because you can use the upscalers like the RetroTinks and things in order to put your retro games on there. This might be a way to use that pass-through on the console that they have in order to pass that controller information onto your original hardware, but on your HD television. So
Right.
I do like that is an option, because I feel like that's not much of an option with the other light guns that are on the market. But maybe I'm just not in that. Either way, I love it. I say kickstart, and we wish them the best of luck.
Yeah, hope they succeed.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Now it is time for Nerd Flex.
Ooh.
A segment where you, the viewer, try to stump the host. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Mac and I use nothing but our noggins to try to answer these questions. No phone a friend, no Google. And we have a test bank for weeks when the group is feeling shy. Now, if you're here live, you have a job to do. Get a live multiple choice gaming related question in the chat. Mac and I will try to answer it. But Mac, let's start with a question from the test bank. And these are randomized. I hit the random button and it goes through the test bank. The first one that comes up is a special round question. Name 3 games with a celebrity name in the title. Name 3 games with a celebrity name in the title. Now, I'll say this. Could we argue that Mario's a celebrity? Yes. But we're not going to play by those rules. We're going to go by real-life celebrities. Sounds like you had one in mind.
I've got 3 in mind.
Oh, okay.
One, I'm sure we're both thinking. Ray, should we say it on the count of 3?
Yeah.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Ken
Mike
Griffey
Tyson's
Jr.'s
Punch-Out!
winning run.
Oh, okay.
We were completely different, but that's a good one.
Yeah. Okay. Next one I was thinking was Evander Holyfield's Boxing.
That's not a game.
That absolutely is a game.
Is it really?
Yeah. And let's see, I believe also Hulk Hogan's WrestleMania, I believe, is a title as well. And then there is
hilarious that you're coming at us with sports stuff.
I know,
these
right?
are all sports related.
This is one of these rare moments where my things are aligned. There's Mavis Beacon teaches typing, but arguably she's not a celebrity.
I don't know who that is. I have no idea who that is.
Let's see. Gosh, there's Lee Trevano's putting challenge.
There's Jack Nicklaus Golf, I believe, on the NES.
Jack Nicklaus Golf.
Pretty sure there's like Jordan versus Bird on NES or something like that. There's a lot of sports games with celebrity names.
So many sports games.
Kobe Bryant's NBA Courtside on the Nintendo 64.
Yes.
There's a lot of sports games. Any non-sports games we can think of to mix it up a little bit?
Madden.
John Madden, that is definitely sports.
That's the thing. A.R. Wilson, splendid call out. Yes, I guess I am a sports ball expert and a sports fan insofar as it concerns sport game titles.
On the Sega Genesis, Michael Jackson's
Moonwalker. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was fun.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's more than 3.
Yeah, we more than exceeded the brief.
So let's see which ones are here. Oh, dude, we forgot one of the most obvious. So here's ones they list. Tony Hawk series. We forgot Tony Hawk.
Oh, yeah.
Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, David Beckham's Soccer, Lee Caravalo's Putting Challenge, and in parentheses it says Lee Trevino's Fighting Golf.
I said Lee Trevino's Putting Challenge instead of Lee Carvino. So anyway, I was at least in the right ballpark. But yeah, no, there's tons of them, and it's mostly sports. Yeah, you're right.
You're good. Well, hey, I just did another randomize, and it came up with another special round. Name 3 stars of video game movies. Now, I assume it wants us to name the real actors and actresses.
Yeah, I think so.
So Jack Black comes to mind. He's in Minecraft, and he's also in Mario.
Angelina Jolie.
Tomb Raider, yep.
I mean, I guess if we're sticking with the Mario movie, we've got Chris Pratt and Charlie Day.
Yep.
Christian Slater was in the Alone in the Dark movie.
Okay. I'm trying to think of other video game movies. It's crazy how you draw a blank.
Oh, Mila Jovovich. She did all the Resident Evil games, Resident Evil movies.
There's the Final Fantasy movie, but I can't remember who any of the people are that are in it. What Double Dragon movie? I'm not going to know any of these actors.
Yeah. Oh shoot. I actually, believe it or not, I watched that recently. But I can't remember the name of anybody, but it was one of the sisters from Charmed. Was on that. And the T-1000, Robert, whatever his...
John Leguizamo.
Oh, yeah. John Leguizamo, you're right, in the Mario movie. But
movie.
in Double Dragon, Robert, whatever, he's the T-1000 from Terminator 2. He's the main baddie of that. I can't remember his...
I think we have named plenty. Interested to see which ones are on the other side. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, Angelina Jolie is in here. Mila, it's spelled Anjalina, Angelina. That's okay. Angelina Jolie, Mila Jovovich, Chris Pratt, Jack Black, and Jake Gyllenhaal. I wonder what movie Jake Gyllenhaal was in.
Oh, he's from the Prince of Persia movie.
Oh, right.
That's right.
Great movie.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, same.
Cool.
Same. I actually took like 3 people to the cinema to watch it. So I watched it 3 times with different people, and then I bought it on DVD after.
Nice. Yeah, we own that on DVD as well.
Woo!
Nice. Well, last question for the week, Mac. It's a Zelda question. What is the name of the additional harder version of Ocarina of Time released for the GameCube?
I think Master Quest.
I did not know there was a harder version on the GameCube. I know there's a Zelda 4-in-1 disc, a demo disc, that I actually own. That's kind of hard to find, and I think it may have Ocarina of Time. I have no idea, so I'm just going to move on. We can go with Master Quest. Let's see what the answer is. Yeah, it is called Master Quest. How do you know this stuff?
I don't know, Lum. I have no idea what's... If I could control what got rattled up in this brain of mine, I would have been done with college significantly faster.
Right.
Point being is, dude, that's a clean sweep. We got every single question right.
That is true. That is true. And that has been Nerdflex.
Well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese.
Legalese. Ooh, I lose my voice.
I am not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast. And what I was going to talk about tonight was the information that Lam presented as our topic for the week.
What?
That was 100% what I was prepped for legalese. Mostly as just a side note to remind everybody that the European Citizens Initiative, if you are a citizen of Europe, you can still sign on to that. They're not quite halfway there, and they've still got about 2 months left to go. So if you think that there is a reasonable path for the law in the European Union to tell developers to, preserve those games when they don't want to sell them anymore, and you think that this might be a way, regardless of what I may think or what anybody else tells you, maybe you should look at that and sign it and encourage other people to sign it as well.
And to be clear, one thing I have to say, it's not just when they don't want to sell them anymore. It's when they don't want to support them anymore. Like, to me, that's a very big differentiator.
Well, I mean, I don't know, because...
I don't think that they're saying, hey, I don't want to sell this anymore, right? I think they're saying we don't want to support this anymore. I think that's a fundamental difference.
When we're talking about games that have to have constant support from a publisher, when they don't want to support it anymore is also usually when they stop selling it.
No, not at all. There are games that will... Anyway, we could talk about this another time, but there are games that stay up on the shop where they're like, hey, we're going to let you still buy this, but the last patch has come out, right?
Sure. But this is in the context of a game that requires constant support from the publisher in order to play. they don't sell it after their DRM checks are going to fail and the game can't be playable.
Digitally.
Even those that are required.
But physically.
No, there are plenty of physical games that require it. Even like The Crew that kicked off the thing, The Crew was sold as a physical product. Those discs no longer function because it required phoning home to the publisher in order for the game to be playable, even with the things. But that was part of the DRM.
Right, but they still profit, right? I love this conversation.
I mean,
they still profit from the sale of those discs.
Well, they're not selling the discs any longer, but they're also not selling. They stopped selling the games when they said that they were cutting support for it. Usually, the Venn diagram of those two is almost a perfect circle, but you could be right. I could be crazy.
I don't know, man. For a game like Concord, I'd say you're right. But for other stuff where there's just like stuff on the shelves, it's still getting sold, and if you buy it, that's kind of stupid. But I don't know. Maybe I'm being picky. I just think it's a fundamental difference.
Oh, hey, no, I think there's it's a beautiful world out there, and I'm glad that we can both look at the same thing and get to a different spot. Either way, though, I was going to mention the European Citizens Initiative, remind people for legalese that they could go sign on to that if they thought it was there. And then I was going to bring up that, the death of games, those publishers, those numbers from Ross Scott, in order to just kind of have a quick conversation about it. So I am so glad, because y'all remember, we don't
coordinate. We're unorganized.
We are spontaneous in our madness. And so this is a situation where I'm so glad that you brought it up, because it just, shows how big of a deal it is in video games. And I think that's beautiful, man.
100%.
And that's legalese.
Nice. Well, maybe we should coordinate, because you probably would have articulated this way better than I did.
Oh, no,
but that's okay.
I wouldn't change it for the world.
Appreciate it, brother.
I thought it was great.
Appreciate it, brother. Well, hey, we've been babbling on for more than our usual hour. And so before we go, we like to talk about what we've been watching and what we've been playing. And we're always looking for recommendations. Hit up our email. Send us we don't really use Twitter anymore. At least I don't. But hit us up with a message. You know how to get in touch. Let us know what you're watching and playing. Or let us know here live. Mac, what have you been into the past couple weeks?
So I've been playing some old school Flash games that they brought forward onto Steam. Sort of that good old nostalgia for me. And recently I picked up, there was a collection of Flash games called Shift that was all about, it was basically a platformer, but you shifted from white space to black space and black space to white space on the thing. So like you inverted the screen. I've been playing those games lately as my comfort over the illness-prone weekend. And that's about all that I've been playing. As for watching, the most recent season of Taskmaster now has Jason Mantzoukas on it, and it's the first American comedian that they've had on that show in the UK. So I've been enjoying that, and that's about it. What about you, Mr. Nice Guy?
You know what, Mac? Been so busy, but I have made a little bit of time for video games. So, every once in a while, I've been working to curate my Game Boy collection in terms of individual games. And so I saw a copy of Darkwing Duck at one of my local game stores, and I picked it up, and it's a fun game. I love it. Some say it's a Mega Man game. It kind of is. It's kind of not. But I'm having a lot of fun with that, so I've been playing that on my Analog Pocket. Along with, I actually was traveling last week. Shout out to Wilhelm Shakespeare for being a guest on the show. And while I was traveling, I did hit a retro game store, and I picked up a copy of Kirby's Pinball Land as well.
Nice.
Or Kirby's Pinball, and having a blast with that. What a fun game. Mac, there's so many really, really good games out there that we just never had when we were kids. Because who had 100 Game Boy games when they were a kid, unless their parents were just crazy, right?
Yeah.
So you were guaranteed to miss out on something, and that's one that I missed out on. So as far as watching The Last of Us and prepping for my annual Father's Day trip, so researching and watching a lot of YouTube videos on that location, and that is it for me.
Nice. Well, thank you everyone for being here, for being part of the show, for listening to it after the fact. We appreciate y'all, and thanks for helping make episode 344 what it was. If you would like to be here with us for the live recording, you know what to do. Go to twitch.tv/2nerdsinapod. That's with the number 2, of course. And you can join us on Mondays at 9 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Pacific. But until we see you next time, remember to be excellent to each other and keep it nerdy.
Deuces. See y'all. Bye.
Bye.